And looking back now, I realize it was the most calculated risk I've ever taken in my entire academic career. My professor drops the absolute bomb 3 weeks before finals that the group project is worth a staggering 70% of our grade, and we get to pick our own teams, which should have felt like a gift, but ended up being the setup for the worst betrayal of my college experience. My 3 best friends since freshman year immediately swarm me, surrounding my desk before I can even fully process what the professor just announced, and they're saying, "Obviously we're together, right?" with these huge grins on their faces, and honestly, I'm completely pumped about it because we always crush projects together. We have this amazing dynamic, this perfect rhythm of working as a unit that's gotten us through 3 years of college successfully. Professor hands us this massive case study about restructuring a failing tech company and says it needs a comprehensive 30-page analysis plus a polished 20-minute presentation, and I can feel the weight of it in my hands as I flip through the pages, already seeing the complexity of what we're being asked to do. I'm already mentally dividing the work in my head, thinking about who's best at financial analysis, who has the strongest writing skills, who's the most compelling presenter, when my friend goes, "You're so good at this stuff, you should take the lead." And the other 2 are nodding like enthusiastic bobbleheads, and at the time, I interpret this as trust, as respect for my organizational skills and academic abilities. I figure, okay, that makes sense. I'll coordinate everything, assign sections based on everyone's individual strengths, set up our Google Drive with a clear folder structure, create a realistic timeline with built-in buffer days. You know, actual leader stuff. The kind of project management that separates good teams from great ones. We make this whole elaborate show about being the absolute dream team, talking loudly enough that other groups can hear us, radiating confidence and capability, and the professor even smiles at us with this knowing look, saying, "This should be interesting," which I take as a compliment, as recognition that we're the group to watch. The assignment packet is thick as a textbook when I really examine it that evening. Easily 100 pages of dense reading material, case studies, financial statements, market analyses, and I'm already highlighting key sections that night in my dorm room, using my color-coded system that served me so well, filling the margins with preliminary notes and questions we'll need to address. I create a group chat specifically for the project and send a detailed message about our first meeting tomorrow at the library, specifying the exact time, the floor we'll meet on, what everyone should bring, and I mention we should all come having read at least the first 30 pages of the packet. Everyone confirms with enthusiasm, thumbs up emojis, can't wait messages, "We got this" declarations that make me feel like we're genuinely unified in this endeavor. First meeting arrives, and nobody shows up, not a single person, and I sit there for 2 full hours with my meticulously color-coded notes spread across the table and my structured timeline printed and ready to distribute, checking my phone every few minutes while they're actually posting Instagram stories from some party I wasn't invited to, red cups and laughing faces filling my feed. I text the group, "Where are you guys?" trying to keep my tone light and not accusatory, and I get back a series of messages that feel increasingly hollow. "Sorry. Emergency came up, you got this though." And, "Something came up last minute, we trust you." Next day in class, they're literally sitting 3 rows behind me whispering and laughing among themselves, and when I turn around to make eye contact, maybe to communicate my disappointment or confusion, they just wave at me cheerfully like nothing happened, like they didn't completely blow off our first meeting. Second meeting attempt, which I schedule again with plenty of advance notice and multiple reminders. One friend actually shows up, but she's 45 minutes late, rushing in with her coat still half on, just to tell me she has to leave for her boyfriend's thing in like 5 minutes. But she says, "Email me what I need to do." Like that's somehow a solution to her complete absence from the collaborative process. I created this incredibly detailed spreadsheet with everyone's parts clearly delineated, deadlines that were reasonable and staggered, research sources already vetted and linked, color-coded by priority and difficulty, and I share it in the group chat with a message explaining how I've tried to make this as easy as possible for everyone, and I get crickets, absolute radio silence, not even an acknowledgement that they've seen it. Week 2 rolls around, and I'm starting to feel this gnawing anxiety in my stomach. This sense that something is fundamentally wrong with our group dynamic, and I head over to our usual lunch spot to eat with them, hoping maybe we can talk about the project in a casual setting, figure out what's going wrong. I'm approaching their table when I overhear one of them saying, voice dripping with disdain, "Why is he being such a try-hard about this project? It's not that deep." And another one goes, "Classic bookworm behavior," with this laugh that cuts right through me, and I freeze mid-step, realizing they've been talking about me behind my back this whole time. I confront them after class that same day, trying to keep my voice steady, asking directly, "Are you guys going to help on the final or not?" Because I need a straight answer. I need to know if I should be doing this entire project myself, and they suddenly transform, putting on these concerned and serious faces, like actors switching into character. Of course we are. We're working on it, don't worry. Stop stressing. You're going to give yourself an ulcer. But then later that same week, I see them walking out of the professor's office hours together, a meeting I knew nothing about, wasn't invited to, and they scatter when they spot me down the hallway like they've been caught doing something they shouldn't. Later that day, the professor even pulls me aside after class and says with this concerned expression, "Your teammates mentioned you haven't been responding to their attempts to collaborate? That doesn't sound like you." And it's like reality is being rewritten in front of me. My stomach drops, this sinking feeling of being gaslit, of having the narrative twisted against me, and I immediately pull out my phone with shaking hands and show him everything. The wall of ignored messages, the empty shared documents with only my name in the edit history, the unanswered emails, and he just nods slowly while scrolling through, but then says, "Try to work it out. Group dynamics are part of the grade," which feels like a dismissal, like I'm being told to just accept this dysfunction. A week before the presentation, when panic is really starting to set in because we have nothing concrete, I check our shared drive, hoping against hope that someone has contributed something, anything, and I find that one person uploaded a single paragraph, maybe 4 sentences, that's literally copy and pasted directly from Wikipedia, not even paraphrased, not even trying to hide the plagiarism. I text the group desperately, my message probably coming across as frantic. "Presentation is Monday. We have nothing. We need to meet this weekend." And the only response I get back is a casual, "Relax, we'll figure it out Sunday night," like we're talking about picking a movie to watch, not a project worth 70% of our grade. I didn't trust it for a second, every instinct telling me I was being set up for failure, so I made a decision and got to work on my own, spending the entire week essentially living in the library, surviving on coffee and vending machine snacks, building a presentation from scratch, doing all the research myself, crafting every analysis, creating every slide. Sunday night arrives, 11 p.m., and I'm putting the final touches on the presentation I built completely alone, adjusting the last few formatting details, double-checking my citations, when I get an email notification that makes my phone buzz on the desk. It's from the professor, sent to the whole group by what is clearly an accident, the kind of mistake that reveals everything, obviously meant just for my 3 friends based on the tone and content. Subject line reads, "Concerns about team member," and I feel this cold dread wash over me as I click it open. I open it, and my blood runs absolutely cold, ice in my veins, because there's a whole email chain, weeks of correspondence I never knew existed. My friends had been meeting with the professor regularly for weeks, systematically building a case that I was the problem teammate, the difficult one, the one sabotaging the group project. Screenshots of me micromanaging in the group chat, which were really just me trying to organize us and keep us on track. Claims that I refused to let them contribute, that I was being controlling and domineering, that I shut down their ideas. One of them even wrote in this concerned, reasonable tone, "He just wants all the credit for himself because he's obsessed with his GPA. It's honestly sad to watch. We've been trying to work around him, but he won't let us access the files," which is an outright lie since I shared everything openly from day one. But here's the part that makes my hands physically shake as I'm reading. The detail that transforms this from dysfunction to calculated betrayal. Attached to the latest email is a separate presentation, a complete PowerPoint file, their own version that I never knew existed. 20 slides of mediocre work, poorly researched and badly formatted, but it exists. It's real. It's functional. They'd been working together this whole time, meeting secretly, building their own project, just completely without me, deliberately excluding me while pretending to be overwhelmed and unable to contribute. The professor's response to their latest email reads, "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. This is a serious matter. Let's discuss alternatives for your grade separate from his." And I can see he's already being convinced by their narrative, already preparing to let them succeed while I fail. Why would they do this? The question loops in my mind all night, keeping me awake, because we'd been friends for 3 years. Real friends, I thought. People I'd helped through breakups and family problems and academic struggles. I scroll back through the email chain with a growing sense of horror, going back to the very beginning, and I find it, the smoking gun, an email from week 1, right after we first got the assignment. If we tank his participation grade and do our own project, we can still pass, and he'll be the one who fails. Then maybe he'll stop making the rest of us look bad in every class. And it's signed by all 3 of them, a conspiracy from the very start, before I'd done anything that could be construed as controlling or difficult. Monday morning arrives and I barely slept. but I walked into that classroom with 2 USB drives clutched in my hand, and I had never felt more calm, more certain of what I needed to do. One drive had my complete project, 30 pages of analysis, and 20 slides of professional presentation. The other had screenshots of every ignored message, every email from the chain, every piece of evidence of their entire scheme laid out chronologically. When the professor called us up to present, and my 3 friends were already standing nervously at the front, I walked up and plugged in drive number 2 first, the evidence drive, and I didn't say a single word, not one explanation or accusation. I just let it project on the screen while the whole class read their plan to sabotage me, watched the emails appear one by one, saw the timeline of deception unfold in real time. My 3 friends went pale, the color draining from their faces. One of them actually gasped, and I could hear murmuring spreading through the classroom, other students reading and reacting with shock. Then I calmly switched to my actual presentation, drive number 1, and delivered 20 minutes of absolutely flawless analysis, every argument supported, every conclusion backed by data, speaking clearly and confidently, while my former friends stood frozen beside me, unable to do anything but watch. The professor stopped me after, his expression unreadable, and asked to speak privately once the class cleared out. I handed him both drives, the complete evidence and the complete project, and said with a steadiness I didn't entirely feel, "I'll take my 0 on the group portion. It's worth it." 2 days later, I got an email that I must have read 50 times, trying to process what it meant. I'd failed the group project as expected, received a 0 for the team component just as I'd anticipated, which dropped my final grade in the course to a C, the lowest grade I'd ever received in my academic career. But attached to that grade notification was a letter of recommendation to Harvard's graduate program, personally written by the professor, that started with words I'll never forget. In my 20 years of teaching, I have never witnessed a student handle betrayal and adversity with such integrity and capability. Update. I spend the next 3 hours sitting at my desk in my dorm room, laptop open to that email, scrolling up and down through the professor's words, like I'm searching for some hidden meaning I missed the first 49 times I read it. My roommate comes back from his evening class around 9, drops his backpack by his bed, and I hear him pause when he notices I'm in the exact same position I was in when he left 3 hours earlier. He knocks on my desk even though I'm right there, trying to get my attention, and asks if everything's okay, because apparently I look like I've seen a ghost or something. I open my mouth to answer, but nothing comes out because, honestly, I don't know if things are okay or completely messed up, or somehow both at the same time, so I just show him the email without saying anything. He reads the whole thing, the C grade notification, and then the Harvard recommendation letter attached below it, and his eyebrows keep going up higher and higher until he finally looks at me and goes, "Dude, what?" Which pretty much sums up exactly how I feel about the entire situation. I close the laptop and tell him I need to sleep on it, even though I know I'm not going to sleep at all tonight, and he nods slowly like he gets it, but I can tell he's still confused about what just happened. The next morning, my phone buzzes with an email from Robin Stratton, my academic advisor who I've maybe talked to twice in 3 years, and the subject line just says, "Urgent, need to see you today," in all caps, which immediately makes my stomach drop. I check the time, and it's barely 7 in the morning, which means she must have sent this the second she got to her office, and I text back asking when she wants to meet. She responds within 30 seconds, saying she has time at 9 if I can make it, and I'm already pulling on clothes and heading out the door, because something about her tone makes this feel really important. I get to her office at 8:55 and knock on the door, and she calls out for me to come in before I can even finish knocking. When I walk in, she's got papers spread across her entire desk, and I immediately recognize the professor's recommendation letter printed out on official letterhead, with entire sections highlighted in yellow marker. She points at the chair across from her desk, and I sit down, and she slides the highlighted letter across to me without any small talk or greeting. She tells me she's been an academic advisor for 15 years, and she's seen maybe 3 letters like this in her entire career, that professors don't write recommendations like this unless they genuinely mean every single word they're saying. I pick up the letter and look at the highlighted sections, which are basically all the parts about my integrity and capability, and how I handled an impossible situation, and Robin is watching me read with this intense expression. She explains that a letter this strong from a professor who clearly witnessed something significant can actually carry more weight in graduate admissions than a perfect GPA, because it shows character and real-world problem-solving that grades can't measure. I ask her if she really thinks my academic future isn't destroyed by the C grade, and she leans back in her chair and says, "My future might actually be stronger now than if none of this had happened," which sounds crazy, but the way she says it makes me almost believe her. I head to my next class after leaving Robin's office, and the second I walk into the lecture hall, I spot my 3 former friends sitting in a completely different section than where we normally sit together. They're clustered in the back corner on the opposite side of the room, and when I make eye contact with one of them, she immediately looks away and starts talking to the other 2 like she didn't see me. I take my usual seat near the front and pull out my laptop, and I can feel them watching me from across the room, even though every time I glance back, they're pretending to look at their phones or their notes. The lecture starts, and I try to focus on what the professor is saying, but I keep hearing whispers from the students sitting around me, and I catch fragments of conversations that are clearly about what happened during the presentation. 2 girls sitting in the row behind me are talking in these low voices, and I hear one of them say something about how everyone saw the emails projected on the screen, and the other one responds that she can't believe anyone would actually plan something that messed up. When class ends, my former friends practically sprint out of the lecture hall, grabbing their stuff and leaving before the professor even finishes her closing remarks, and I realize this is going to be the new normal for the rest of the semester. I'm walking across campus toward the library when I pass a group of students from the same class, and they stop talking the second they see me, which makes it pretty obvious they were discussing the whole situation. One of them gives me this sympathetic nod, and another one actually mouths, "That sucks," as I walk past, and I realize the story has spread way faster than I expected it to. Later that afternoon, I get a call from an unknown campus number, and when I answer, it's the department chair's assistant, asking if I can come in for a meeting about an academic integrity matter. My stomach immediately drops through the floor because I'm thinking somehow I'm the one in trouble, that maybe the professor changed his mind, or the administration thinks I did something wrong by exposing everything publicly. I show up to the department chair's office 20 minutes later, feeling like I'm walking to my own execution, and her assistant tells me to go right in. The department chair is this older woman who always looks serious, and when I sit down across from her desk, she's got a thick file folder open in front of her. She starts talking before I can even get nervous enough to say anything, explaining that the professor reported the entire situation to administration the day after the presentation happened. She tells me my former teammates are currently facing a formal disciplinary review for academic dishonesty and conspiracy to sabotage another student, which are apparently really serious charges that the university takes extremely seriously. I'm sitting there trying to process this information, and she continues explaining that the department wants to make sure I wasn't penalized beyond just the grade itself, that they want to verify the situation didn't affect my standing in other ways. She asks if anyone has retaliated against me or tried to intimidate me since the presentation, and I tell her no, that mostly people have just been avoiding me or whispering about what happened. She nods and makes some notes in the file, and then she tells me something that makes my brain stop working for a second. The department chair explains that all 3 of my former friends are being required to retake the entire course next semester with different professors, and they're each receiving formal academic integrity violations that will be permanently noted on their transcripts. She's saying this in a calm, professional voice like she's discussing routine administrative business, but I'm sitting there realizing that their entire academic futures just got seriously damaged because of what they tried to do to me. She continues explaining that these violations will show up on any graduate school applications they submit, and that most programs take academic integrity issues very seriously when reviewing candidates. I ask her what exactly that means for them, and she's honest about it, telling me that many competitive graduate programs automatically reject applicants with integrity violations, and that even jobs requiring background checks might see these marks on their records. I should feel happy about this, like justice got served or karma finally caught up with them. But instead, I just feel this heavy exhaustion settling into my bones. She asks if I have any questions about the disciplinary process, or if I want to be involved in their hearings, and I tell her no, that I just want to move forward and focus on my own academic future. She seems to understand and tells me the department will handle everything from here, and that I should reach out if anything changes or if I experience any problems. I leave her office feeling weird and disconnected, like I just witnessed something significant happen, but I'm too tired to fully process what it means. That evening I meet with Robin again because she emailed asking me to come back to discuss next steps, and when I get to her office, she's got a whole plan laid out on her whiteboard. She starts explaining how we're going to approach my graduate school applications, and she's using words like compelling narrative and character arc, like my life is some kind of story we're crafting for admissions committees. She tells me the Harvard recommendation combined with my otherwise strong academic record creates this really powerful narrative about resilience and integrity, about someone who faced an impossible choice and chose to do the right thing, even when it cost them something significant. I'm listening to her talk, and I'm starting to see how this could actually work, how the C grade might not be the disaster I thought it was. Robin suggests I apply to multiple top programs because this kind of faculty endorsement carries serious weight in admissions decisions, more weight than most students realize. She pulls up a list of programs on her computer and starts going through them with me, explaining why each one might be a good fit based on my academic interests, and the story we're telling about who I am as a student and future professional. She's talking about Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and a bunch of other schools I always thought were completely out of my reach, and she's saying them like they're realistic options now. I ask her if she really thinks I have a shot at these places with a C on my transcript, and she looks at me with this expression that's half amused and half exasperated. She tells me I'm still thinking about this wrong, that I'm seeing the C as a weakness when it's actually part of what makes my application compelling, because it shows I was willing to fail rather than compromise my values. We spend the next hour mapping out an application strategy, and by the time I leave her office, I'm feeling something I haven't felt since before this whole nightmare started, which is actual hope about my academic future. 2 weeks pass, and I'm sitting in class when the professor approaches me after the lecture ends, and most of the other students have already filed out of the room. He asks if he can talk to me for a minute, and I nod, even though my heart is suddenly racing because I'm not sure what this is about. He starts apologizing, actually using the word sorry multiple times, explaining that he initially believed my former teammate's false narrative about me being difficult and controlling. He tells me he's been teaching for 20 years, and he thought he could read students pretty accurately, that he prided himself on understanding group dynamics and identifying problem students. But he says they completely fooled him with their coordinated lies, that they played him perfectly by seeming concerned and reasonable while systematically building a case against me. He looks genuinely upset about this, like it bothers him that he got manipulated so easily, and he tells me he's sorry for doubting me when I first tried to explain what was happening. I don't really know what to say, so I just tell him it's okay, that they fooled a lot of people, not just him, and he nods, but still looks bothered by the whole thing. He mentions that he's been thinking a lot about how he handles group projects and student complaints, and that he's planning to change some of his policies because of what happened with us. We talk for a few more minutes about random class stuff, and then he tells me again that he meant every word in that Harvard recommendation letter, that watching me handle that situation with evidence and composure was genuinely one of the most impressive things he's seen a student do. I thank him and head out, and I'm realizing that adults can mess up and feel bad about it too, which somehow makes me feel less angry about the whole situation. Later that week, I start working on my graduate school personal statement, and Robin suggested I address the group project situation directly instead of trying to hide it or pretend it didn't happen. I'm sitting at my laptop staring at a blank document, trying to figure out how to write about the worst experience of my college career in a way that sounds professional and reflective instead of bitter and angry. Robin stops by my dorm that evening to check on my progress, and I show her the 3 paragraphs I've managed to write, which are pretty rough and probably too emotional. She reads through what I have and then sits down next to me, and she starts asking me questions about what I learned from the experience and how it changed my understanding of integrity and professional ethics. We spend 2 hours working through the statement together, and she helps me frame the whole situation as a defining moment that tested my values and forced me to choose between convenience and integrity. She's really good at taking my angry, emotional rambling and turning it into something that sounds thoughtful and mature. And by the end of the night, I have a draft that actually tells the story in a way that makes me sound like someone who learned something important rather than just someone who got screwed over by bad friends. I'm in the library during midterms week, buried in textbooks and trying to study for 3 different exams, when I see my former friends walking toward my table. My whole body tenses up because I haven't talked to any of them since the presentation, and I'm really not interested in having a conversation now. They stop at my table, and one of them starts talking, saying they want to apologize and explain themselves, that they've been wanting to reach out for weeks, but didn't know how. I close my textbook and look up at them, and I can see they're all nervous and uncomfortable, shifting their weight and not making eye contact. I tell them clearly and directly that I have nothing to say to them, and I'd prefer if they just left me alone, and one of them immediately starts crying. She's saying they didn't think it would go this far, that they didn't realize how serious the consequences would be, and the other 2 are nodding along like this somehow makes what they did okay. I stand up and start packing my stuff, because I'm not doing this. I'm not sitting here making them feel better about their choices or listening to excuses about how they didn't mean for things to get so bad. The one who's crying tries to grab my arm and I pull away, telling them again that I don't want to hear it and they need to leave me alone. I walk away from the table and head to a different floor of the library, and I can hear one of them calling after me, but I just keep walking because I'm not interested in their apologies or their regrets. They made their choices, and now they're dealing with the results, and that's not my problem to fix, or my burden to carry. A few days later, I get an email from the teaching assistant who helped run our class, asking if she can meet with me to talk about something. I'm curious, so I agree, and we meet at a coffee shop near campus the next afternoon. She tells me she witnessed the entire presentation incident, and she wanted to reach out privately to say she thought what I did was incredibly brave. She explains that she's seen group project betrayals before during her years as a teaching assistant, students getting left behind or having their work stolen, but she's never seen someone handle it with the kind of composure and evidence that I brought to the situation. She says most students just take the bad grade and move on because they don't know how to fight back, or they're scared of making things worse. Hearing her say this means more than I expected, because it confirms I wasn't crazy for how I responded, that exposing everything publicly with evidence wasn't some over-the-top reaction, but actually the right way to handle an impossible situation. We talk for about an hour about the whole experience, and she shares some stories about other students she's seen get taken advantage of in group projects, and it makes me realize this kind of thing happens more often than people talk about. She tells me she's going to use my situation as an example when she teaches her own classes someday, as a case study in standing up for yourself and documenting everything when you're being treated unfairly. When I leave the coffee shop, I'm feeling better than I have in weeks, like maybe this whole nightmare actually meant something and could help other students avoid the same situation. The next day, Robin emails asking me to stop by her office when I have time. And when I show up, she's got someone sitting in the chair across from her desk, a guy who looks maybe mid-20s with glasses and a backpack covered in university pins. Robin introduces him as a graduate student in the department who's finishing his PhD, and she mentions he went through something similar during his undergrad years, and she thought we should talk. The guy extends his hand and tells me his name, and we shake hands while Robin excuses herself to grab coffee, leaving us alone in her office. He starts explaining his situation without me even asking, like he knows exactly why Robin set this up, describing how his senior year group project partners tried to frame him for plagiarism they actually committed, and how he ended up with a failed grade despite being completely innocent. I'm listening and nodding because his story sounds way too familiar, the same pattern of betrayal and false accusations, and I ask him how he managed to still get into grad school with that kind of mark on his record. He leans back in the chair and explains that admissions committees care more about the full story than just grades, that they actually want to see how you handle hard situations. And his application essay about maintaining integrity during the plagiarism incident ended up being what got him into his top choice program. We talk for almost an hour about how to frame difficult experiences in applications, and he keeps emphasizing that what happened to me isn't a weakness, but actually shows character that most applicants can't demonstrate, and by the time Robin comes back with her coffee, I'm feeling way less scared about my academic future. He gives me his email before leaving and tells me to reach out if I need advice during the application process. And after he's gone, Robin asks me how I'm feeling about everything now. I tell her honestly that hearing his perspective helped a lot, that I was starting to think the C grade meant I'd destroyed any chance at good graduate programs, but now I'm seeing it might actually make my application stronger in a weird way. 2 days later, I'm sitting in the library working on a paper when my phone buzzes with an email notification, and I almost ignore it because I get so much spam from the university, but something makes me check it anyway. The subject line says, Graduate Admissions Inquiry, and it's from Harvard's actual admissions office, not some automated system, and my heart starts racing before I even open it. The email is short and professional, acknowledging that I'd sent an early inquiry about their program and mentioning they look forward to reviewing my full application when I submit it in the coming months. But the part that makes me read it 3 times is the last paragraph, where they mention they're already aware of the strong recommendation letter from my professor, and they're interested in learning more about my academic background and research interests. I screenshot the email and send it to Robin immediately, and she responds within minutes telling me to come to her office right now, and when I get there, she's practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. She explains that Harvard doesn't usually acknowledge early inquiries like this, that the fact they mentioned the recommendation letter means they're genuinely interested, and this isn't just some form letter they send to everyone who asks about their program. We spend the rest of the afternoon mapping out my application strategy, and Robin keeps saying this email changes everything, that Harvard reaching out proactively means I have a real shot at getting accepted despite the C grade. Over the next week, 3 different classmates approach me separately, which feels weird, because we've never really talked much before, and each conversation follows basically the same pattern. The first one catches me after our Tuesday lecture, waiting by my desk while everyone else files out, and she starts by saying she's been thinking about what happened with my group project. She explains she's been in similar situations with team assignments, where she ends up doing all the work, while others coast on her effort, but she never had the courage to expose it the way I did, and watching what happened made her realize she needs to start standing up for herself. The second classmate finds me in the library on Thursday, sitting down at my table without asking, and immediately launches into her own story about a group project last semester, where her partners literally stole her research and presented it as their own. She says she just took the bad grade and moved on because she didn't think anyone would believe her, but seeing how I handled my situation with actual evidence made her wish she'd fought back instead of accepting the mistreatment. The third one approaches me at the campus coffee shop on Saturday morning, and he's more direct than the others, telling me he's been letting people take advantage of his collaborative nature for years, always being the one who does extra work to make up for lazy teammates. He mentions that watching what happened to me, seeing how I chose to fail rather than let them get away with their betrayal, actually inspired him to change how he approaches team assignments, and he started documenting everything and setting clear boundaries with group members. The professor emails me the following Monday, asking if I'd be willing to meet during his office hours to discuss my graduate school plans, and I respond immediately saying yes, because I want to hear what he thinks about my chances. When I show up to his office on Wednesday afternoon, he's got papers spread across his desk, and I recognize several graduate program websites pulled up on his computer screen. He gestures for me to sit down and immediately starts talking about different programs he thinks would be excellent fits based on my academic interests, pointing at his computer screen and explaining why each one might work well for me. He's got a whole list prepared, maybe 8 or 9 programs including Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, with notes about faculty members at each school whose research aligns with what I want to study. Then he tells me something that catches me completely off guard, saying he wants to write additional recommendation letters for any programs I'm applying to, not just Harvard, because he feels responsible for initially doubting me and wants to help repair any damage his misjudgment might have caused to my confidence. I try to tell him it's not necessary, that the Harvard letter is already more than I could have hoped for, but he insists, explaining that his letters will carry weight because he witnessed the entire situation firsthand and can speak directly to my character and integrity. We spend almost 2 hours going through each program on his list, discussing application requirements and deadlines, and he offers to review my personal statements before I submit them, which feels like way more support than I ever expected to receive. I spend the next 3 weeks working on applications basically non-stop, crafting personal statements for Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and 3 other competitive programs that the professor recommended. Each statement addresses the group project situation directly, because Robin convinced me that trying to hide it would be worse than owning it honestly. And I work hard to frame it as a learning experience about maintaining integrity under pressure rather than just complaining about bad teammates. Robin reviews every single application before I submit it, meeting with me multiple times per week to go over my essays line by line, helping me find the right balance between acknowledging what happened and demonstrating how it strengthened my commitment to ethical professional practice. She's brutal with her edits, crossing out entire paragraphs that sound too bitter or defensive, pushing me to focus on what I learned rather than what they did to me. And by the time we're done, my personal statements feel authentic and strong instead of whiny or excuse-making. I submit all 6 applications over the course of 1 weekend in November, triple-checking every document and requirement, and when I finally hit submit on the last one, I feel this weird mix of relief and terror, like I've done everything I possibly could, but now it's completely out of my hands. My parents call that Sunday evening after I text them that I submitted all my applications, and my dad answers on speakerphone so my mom can hear too. He tells me right away that he's never been more proud of me than when I chose to fail rather than compromise my integrity, and his voice gets kind of thick, like he might be tearing up, which is weird, because my dad never cries. My mom immediately jumps in worrying about the C grade affecting my future, asking if I'm sure the graduate programs will understand what happened, and I can hear the anxiety in her voice even through the phone. I explain about the Harvard recommendation letter and how the professor is writing additional letters for all my applications, and I tell them about the email from Harvard's admissions office acknowledging my inquiry, and my mom goes quiet for a second before she starts actually crying. She tells me through tears that she raised me right, that even when doing the right thing cost me something significant, I still chose integrity, and she's so proud she doesn't even know what to say. We talk for almost an hour about the different programs I applied to, and what my chances might be, and by the time we hang up, I'm feeling way more confident about my decisions, knowing my parents support me completely, regardless of what happens with the applications. Campus gossip reaches me in bits and pieces over the next few weeks, whispered conversations I overhear in the hallway, and messages from classmates I barely know, all about the disciplinary hearings for my former friends. I hear through multiple sources that all three of them received formal sanctions on their academic records, permanent marks that will show up on any transcripts they request, and they're required to complete mandatory ethics training before they can graduate. One particularly detailed piece of gossip comes from a student who works in the registrar's office, who mentions that one of my former friends tried to transfer to another university to escape the consequences. But the academic integrity violation followed them in their transcript, making it basically impossible to get accepted anywhere decent. Another classmate tells me she heard they're all retaking the course next semester with different professors, and they have to do individual projects instead of group work, which means they can't rely on anyone else to carry them through. I should probably feel happy about this, like justice got served exactly how it should, but mostly, I just feel tired and kind of sad that 3 years of friendship ended this way, with them facing serious consequences and me moving forward without them in my life at all. December arrives, and my email inbox starts filling with messages from graduate programs, and my heart jumps every single time I see a new notification until I can read the subject line. The first interview request comes from Stanford, asking if I'm available for a video call with their admissions committee in early January, and I immediately forward it to Robin asking what this means. She responds within minutes explaining that interview requests are really good signs, that programs don't waste time interviewing candidates they're not seriously considering, and I need to start preparing immediately. 2 days later, Harvard sends their own interview request, followed by another program the day after that, and suddenly I'm juggling 3 different interview schedules and feeling completely overwhelmed. Robin sets up mock interview sessions with me, meeting in her office twice a week to practice answering common questions, and she's tough on me, interrupting when my answers sound too rehearsed or not confident enough. She emphasizes over and over that admissions committees will definitely ask about the group project situation directly, and I need to discuss it without sounding bitter or like I'm making excuses for the C grade, focusing instead on what I learned about standing up for principles, even when it's personally costly. My Harvard interview gets scheduled for a Friday morning in mid-January, and I wake up way too early that day, spending an hour getting ready and testing my laptop camera and microphone to make sure everything works perfectly. The video call starts exactly on time with 3 faculty members appearing on my screen, 2 men and 1 woman, all looking professional and slightly intimidating in their university offices. They start with basic questions about my academic interests and career goals, asking why I want to pursue graduate study in their specific program, and I manage to answer pretty smoothly because Robin and I practiced these exact questions multiple times. Then about 20 minutes in, one of the male professors brings up the group project situation directly, mentioning they noticed the C grade on my transcript and asking me to explain what happened. I take a breath and tell them the whole story factually, explaining how my teammates systematically tried to sabotage me, while building a false narrative with the professor and how I chose to expose their deception with evidence, even though I knew it would cost me the grade. I emphasize what I learned about maintaining integrity under pressure and standing up for what's right, even when it's easier to just go along, and I explain how the experience shaped my understanding of ethical professional practice in ways a perfect grade never could have. The 3 faculty members exchange glances during my explanation, and their follow-up questions focus on how I handled the stress and what I would do differently if faced with a similar situation, which suggests they're viewing it as a strength rather than a red flag like I was worried about. The acceptance letters start arriving in late January, showing up in my email inbox on random weekdays when I'm least expecting them. The first one comes from one of the smaller programs I applied to, offering full tuition coverage plus a modest stipend, and I literally have to read it 4 times before I believe it's real and not some kind of mistake. 3 days later, another acceptance arrives from a different program, this one with an even better funding package, and I'm sitting in the library when I open it, trying not to make noise while I'm internally freaking out about the fact that I got in despite the C grade. I forward both letters to Robin immediately, and she responds telling me to come to her office right now, and when I get there, she's actually smiling bigger than I've ever seen her smile before. She pulls up both acceptance letters on her computer and starts breaking down what each funding package means, explaining that full tuition plus stipend is exactly what I should be looking for. And these offers prove that my integrity and capability matter way more than one bad grade when I'm dealing with people who can see the full context of what happened. We spend the afternoon celebrating in her office, and Robin keeps reminding me that this outcome validates everything I went through, showing that doing the right thing eventually leads to the right results, even when it costs you something significant in the short term. 3 weeks pass in this weird blur of final exams and packing up my dorm room for the summer, and I'm sitting at my desk one Tuesday afternoon when my email notification pings with a message from Harvard Graduate Admissions. My hands actually shake a little bit as I click it open, because I've been checking my inbox obsessively for weeks, and the subject line just says, "Admissions Decision," which could mean literally anything. I open the email and start reading, and I have to go back to the beginning and read it again, because my brain isn't processing the words correctly. And then I read it a third time and a fourth time before it actually sinks in that this is real. The letter starts with "Congratulations" in bold text and explains that I've been accepted to Harvard's graduate program with full tuition coverage, plus a stipend that's honestly more generous than I expected, enough to actually live on without working a second job. But the part that makes me stop breathing for a second is the paragraph in the middle where they specifically mention the professor's recommendation letter, and how my demonstrated commitment to ethical practice under pressure made me stand out among hundreds of qualified applicants who probably all had better GPAs than mine. They're saying the group project situation, the thing I thought destroyed my academic future, actually became the reason they wanted me. And I'm sitting there staring at my laptop screen, trying to process this complete reversal of everything I thought I knew about how graduate admissions worked. I screenshot the acceptance letter and send it to Robin immediately with just a string of exclamation points because I literally cannot form words, and she responds within maybe 30 seconds, telling me to get to her office right now. I grab my keys and basically sprint across campus to the advising building, taking the stairs 2 at a time up to her floor, and when I burst through her door, she's already standing up with this huge smile on her face. She makes me sit down and read the entire letter out loud to her word by word. And when I get to the part about ethical practice under pressure, her smile gets even bigger. And she says, this is exactly what she meant about integrity, mattering more than perfect grades when you're dealing with people who understand context. I'm walking across campus toward the library 2 days later, still kind of floating from the Harvard acceptance, when I spot one of my former friends coming out of the coffee shop with a drink in her hand. She sees me at the same time, and her face does this complicated thing where she looks surprised and guilty, and something else I can't quite identify, and before I can decide whether to just keep walking, she's already heading toward me with this tentative smile. She stops a few feet away and tells me she heard about Harvard, that apparently word spread pretty quickly through our department, and she wants to congratulate me because that's really amazing. I thank her and keep my voice polite, but completely neutral, not giving her anything beyond basic courtesy, and I can see her shifting her weight from foot to foot, like she's nervous or uncomfortable. She opens her mouth like she wants to say something else, maybe apologize or explain or justify what happened, and I watch her face work through whatever internal debate she's having about whether to actually speak. I don't wait to find out what she's planning to say, because I've genuinely moved past needing closure or apologies from people who spent weeks systematically trying to destroy my academic standing. So I just tell her, I need to get to the library, and I start walking. She doesn't follow me or call after me, and I don't look back to see if she's still standing there watching, and honestly, the whole encounter leaves me feeling nothing, except maybe a little bit tired. The professor emails me the following week asking if I'd be willing to come to a faculty meeting to present about my experience with the group project situation, explaining that the department wants to use it as a case study for how their current policies can fail students who report problems. I respond saying yes immediately, because if sharing what happened to me can help prevent other students from facing similar situations, then I want to do that, even though the idea of standing in front of a room full of professors and reliving the worst experience of my college career makes my stomach clench. The faculty meeting happens on a Thursday afternoon in one of the conference rooms in the main academic building, and when I walk in, there are maybe 15 professors sitting around a long table with notepads and laptops. The professor introduces me and gives a brief overview of what happened, keeping it factual and professional, and then he turns it over to me to share my perspective. I talk for about 20 minutes, explaining how I tried to report the problems early but got dismissed, how the group dynamics grading system actually protected the students who were sabotaging me rather than the one trying to do the work, how I only got taken seriously after I had to expose everything publicly in front of the entire class. The professors asked questions throughout my presentation, really thoughtful questions about what policies might have helped and what warning signs faculty should watch for, and several of them are taking detailed notes, like they're genuinely planning to change things based on what I'm saying. After the meeting ends, 3 different faculty members approach me separately to thank me for sharing my experience, and to tell me they're planning to revise their group project policies for next semester, adding more frequent check-ins and better systems for students to report problems confidentially. Walking out of that conference room, I feel like maybe the whole nightmare actually accomplished something beyond just my own Harvard acceptance. Like other students might not have to go through what I went through because I was willing to stand up and explain what went wrong. Robin takes me out for coffee the next day to celebrate the Harvard acceptance properly, insisting on paying and picking this nice cafe off campus that I've never been to before. We sit at a table by the window with our drinks, and she tells me she's been an academic advisor for 15 years. That she's watched literally hundreds of students come through her office dealing with every kind of academic crisis imaginable. She explains that the students who impress her most aren't the ones with perfect 4.0 GPAs who never faced any challenges, but the ones who had to make genuinely hard choices when it would have been so much easier to just compromise or look the other way. She's looking at me really directly when she says this, making sure I understand she's talking about me specifically, and she mentions that's exactly why she knew I'd end up somewhere excellent even when I was sitting in her office panicking about the C grade destroying my future. She asks me what I've learned from the whole experience, and I think about it for a minute, trying to find words for something that still feels pretty raw. I tell her honestly that I learned sometimes doing the right thing costs you something real and significant, that integrity isn't free and it's not always rewarded immediately, but that the people and opportunities worth having are the ones that value character over convenience. Robin nods and says, "That's exactly the kind of understanding that will serve me well in graduate school and beyond. That Harvard isn't just getting a smart student, but someone who's already proven they'll stand up for what's right, even when it hurts." The end of semester department reception happens 2 weeks later in the faculty lounge, with snacks and drinks and professors mingling with graduating seniors. I show up feeling weird about the whole thing because I'm not actually graduating yet, still have another year to finish my degree, but Robin insisted I should come since so many faculty members have been following my situation. Within maybe 5 minutes of arriving, 3 different professors approach me to offer congratulations on Harvard, clearly having heard about both the acceptance and the circumstances that led to the recommendation letter. They're all really warm and genuine about it, saying things about how impressed they were with how I handled an impossible situation, and one of them mentions she's already started restructuring her own group project policies based on what she learned from my faculty presentation. The department chair spots me across the room and makes her way over, pulling me aside near the windows where it's a bit quieter. She tells me she wanted me to know that she's planning to use my situation in next year's academic integrity training for all department faculty, specifically focusing on the importance of investigating student complaints thoroughly before dismissing them as personality conflicts or micromanagement. She explains that my case revealed some serious gaps in how they handle group project disputes, and she's grateful I was willing to speak up, even though it cost me significantly in the short term. Hearing this from the actual department chair makes the whole painful experience feel less like a personal tragedy and more like something that might actually create positive change for future students. I'm standing near the food table refilling my plate when I realize my 3 former friends aren't at the reception, even though they're graduating this semester, and this is literally the celebration for graduating seniors. I glance around the room to make sure I didn't just miss them, but they're definitely not here, and when I think about it, I haven't seen them at any of the other end of semester events either. Someone mentions later that they apparently felt too embarrassed to show their faces after everything that happened became public knowledge, that their reputations in the department are basically destroyed among both faculty and students. I feel this brief flash of satisfaction knowing their actions have permanent consequences in this academic community, that they can't just graduate and pretend nothing happened because everyone knows what they tried to do. But mostly, I just feel relieved that I don't have to interact with them anymore. Don't have to navigate awkward encounters or fake politeness with people who spent weeks conspiring to tank my academic standing. They made their choices, and now they're living with the results. And that's really not my problem to solve or my burden to carry anymore. Summer arrives, and I spend it working at a campus research lab and preparing for graduate school, reading through Harvard's orientation materials and researching faculty whose work interests me. The C grade that felt like such a catastrophic failure back in April starts feeling more like the price I paid for maintaining my integrity, less like a permanent stain, and more like proof that I chose principles over convenience when it really mattered. Robin emails me every few weeks to check in and see how my preparation is going, and during one of our email exchanges, she mentions something that makes me pause. She tells me the professor has started using my case as an example in his undergraduate classes. When he talks about ethical behavior and academic integrity, specifically discussing how I chose to fail rather than let the betrayal succeed, and how that decision actually opened doors rather than closing them. Knowing my experience is being used to teach other students about the long-term value of integrity makes the whole painful situation feel less like just a personal crisis, and more like something that might actually help other people make better choices when they face similar dilemmas. August comes faster than I expected, and suddenly I'm packing everything I own into my beat-up car and driving to Cambridge to start Harvard's graduate program. The orientation session happens in this beautiful old building with high ceilings and wood paneling, and the program director stands at the front of the room, welcoming maybe 30 new students from universities all over the world. She talks about what the program values and what they're looking for in students. And at one point, she specifically mentions that they seek people who demonstrate strong ethical foundations and resilience under pressure, students who've proven they can make hard choices when faced with difficult situations. I'm sitting there listening to her describe exactly what I went through, and suddenly I realize my acceptance to Harvard wasn't despite the group project situation, but partially because of how I handled it. The C grade and the betrayal and the choice to expose everything publicly weren't obstacles I had to overcome to get here. They were actually part of what made Harvard want me in the first place. This reframing makes the entire painful experience feel purposeful rather than just traumatic, like everything I went through was leading toward this moment in this room with these people. The orientation activities include small group discussions where we share our backgrounds and what brought us to graduate school, and I end up in a circle with 5 other students from different universities. When it's my turn to talk, I give a brief version of the group project story, explaining how I chose to fail rather than compromise my integrity, and how that decision paradoxically led to my acceptance here. 2 other students in my group immediately perk up and start sharing their own stories about facing difficult ethical situations during undergraduate, moments when they had to choose between what was easy and what was right. One guy from Stanford talks about reporting a cheating ring in his chemistry program, even though it made him extremely unpopular with other students. And a woman from Yale describes refusing to sign off on research data she knew was falsified, even though it cost her a publication opportunity. As we keep talking, I realize the common thread among my new Harvard peers isn't perfect grades or prestigious internships, but that we all chose principle over convenience at some crucial point. And I'm sitting there feeling like I've finally found my actual academic community, people who understand why integrity matters, even when it's costly. My first month at Harvard flies by in a blur of seminars and research meetings and getting oriented to campus, and one evening I get an email from the professor asking how I'm settling in and whether graduate school is living up to my expectations. I write back honestly telling him I'm genuinely thriving, that the program is challenging, but I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I thank him again for the recommendation letter that made all of this possible. His response comes the next morning, and I read it while drinking coffee in my tiny graduate student apartment. He writes that he's proud of how I handled an impossible situation, that watching me choose integrity over self-interest reminded him why he became a teacher in the first place, not just to transmit information, but to help shape people of genuine character. He mentions that my case has made him rethink how he approaches teaching and student conflicts, that he's more careful now about investigating complaints thoroughly rather than assuming the student who seems most reasonable is telling the truth. Reading his email makes me realize the whole experience changed both of us in ways that will probably affect hundreds of future students. And somehow, that makes everything I went through feel worth it, in a way I couldn't have understood back when I was sitting in that classroom exposing the betrayal to everyone. Thinking process. Let me analyze the continuation requirements. Continuation. Analysis. Last words. Was sitting in that classroom exposing the betrayal to everyone. Status. Complete sentence ending with period. Transition needed. Start new sentence naturally. Current location. Reflecting on past classroom experience. Scene type. Moving to new Harvard experience. Beat 31. Beat requirements. Beat 31. Faculty advisor assignment. Research project invitation. Meaningful work foundation. Beat 32. 6 months later. Reflection. Happiness assessment. Lessons learned about integrity. Content distribution. 97% action. Assignment process. Meeting. Project discussion. Work activities. 3% reflection. Brief thoughts on meaning. Max. 5% dialogue. Minimal conversation quotes. Vocabulary. Check. Use simple words. Big, not enormous. Happy, not elated. Avoid complex terms. Keep conversational. No em dashes. Use commas, periods. Word count target. 2 beats. X 180 words equals 360 words target. Range. 320 to 400 words required. Character compliance. Faculty advisor. Use role-based reference. My faculty advisor, or the professor. No new named characters needed. Existing. Robin, the professor. Harvard references. Sentence structure. Maximum 25 to 30 words per sentence. Clear breaks with periods. No run-on sentences. Single paragraph format. Seamless start. Previous ended with complete thought about classroom exposure. Need to transition to Harvard program naturally, moving forward in time to the faculty advisor assignment. My first semester at Harvard starts with standard orientation stuff, and then I get assigned to work with a faculty advisor who specializes in academic ethics and integrity in higher education, which feels like the universe has a sense of humor about my entire undergrad situation. She calls me into her office during the second week of classes, and we sit down to discuss my research interests and academic background. When I mention the group project incident from undergrad, she stops taking notes and looks up at me with this really focused expression, asking me to explain the whole situation in detail. I walk her through everything, the betrayal and the evidence, and the choice I made to expose it all publicly, and she listens without interrupting until I finish the entire story. Then she tells me she's currently running a research project about academic integrity systems and student reporting mechanisms, specifically looking at why students don't report problems and how institutions can better protect people who speak up about misconduct. She asks if I'd be interested in contributing to her research as a graduate assistant, helping design better systems based on my first-hand experience with how badly the current ones can fail. I agree immediately because suddenly my painful experience isn't just something that happened to me, but becomes actual data that could help fix broken systems and protect future students from going through what I went through. 6 months pass working on the research project and taking my regular graduate courses, and one morning, I'm walking across Harvard's campus toward the library. When I realize I'm genuinely happy in a way that has nothing to do with perfect grades or keeping friendships that were never real in the first place. The work I'm doing matters, the people around me share my values about integrity and ethical practice, and I learned something important that I couldn't have understood without going through the betrayal. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you something real and significant in the short term, but it also opens doors you never knew existed and connects you with people who actually respect the choices you make, even when they're hard, and that trade was absolutely worth making even when it hurt.